Hey guys, it's Chad with Above Ground Pros. I wanted to put a video together for you on my most valuable information when it comes to chemical maintenance. Now, I really believe that if you understand the concepts in this video and you follow them through your season, this is going to dramatically make your life easier. It's going to keep your pool from turning green. It's going to keep you from having chemical problems. So I wanted to share this with you. Now, at the start here, let's basically, in this video, I'm assuming that you're doing your basic maintenance. The fact that you're keeping your water balanced with your balancing chemicals, you are running your pump the proper amount of time every day, and you're keeping your filter cleaned. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about chlorine maintenance. Now, when I say chlorine in this video, I mean what sanitizer you're using. Now, if you're using a salt system, if you're using an ionizer, if you're using lithium or potassium, it's all the same. So basically, when I say chlorine, what I'm talking about is what you're using for a sanitizer. I'm just going to use chlorine because I believe that's what a lot of us are using. So here's the concept of what you're doing on a week-to-week basis by shocking your pool. You know, you're getting bacteria in the water, so you come out, you put chlorine in the pool, it gets rid of the bacteria. But in the process of it getting rid of the bacteria, it's also using your chlorine up. So what happens is the bacteria comes back, you put more chlorine in, it gets rid of the bacteria, and in turn, your chlorine goes away. So this is what you're basically doing on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis with your chlorine. You're putting it in, it goes away. You're putting it in, it goes away. And that's the life of taking care of a swimming pool. Now, there's three things that use up your chlorine more than normal. Number one, excessive rain. There's a bunch of junk in the rain. When it rains really hard, you're going to get a lot of contamination in the pool, and the rain's going to dilute your pool water, which is going to lower your chlorine content. So when you have tremendous amounts of rain, it's using your chlorine up quicker than normal. Number two is going to be lots of use. When you have big pool parties, all those people in the pool are going to add a lot of contamination to the pool. It's going to use your chlorine up quicker than it normally would. And then the last thing is going to be the intense sun. When we get into the midst of the hot summer months, the sun is going to do basically two things. Number one, it's going to dry the chlorine straight out of the pool and kind of waste your chlorine. And it's going to heat the water up, which everybody knows that hotter water encourages bacteria growth. So you're going to have more bacteria in the pool, and you're going to use your chlorine up quicker than normal. Now, keep something in mind. When I say these three things, I'm talking about excessive amounts of it. I don't mean if it rains for 30 minutes on Tuesday. I'm talking it rains Tuesday, all day Wednesday, into Thursday. That's what I'm talking about. Same thing with lots of use. I'm not talking about your neighbor's friend comes over and swims for a little bit. I'm talking about big pool parties, stuff that is excessive. Now, here's kind of the idea of what you're doing on a week-to-week basis with shocking your pool. You're shocking your pool, you're raising your chlorine up on Sunday, everything's nice and strong, looking good. And then throughout the week, the chlorine slowly starts to drop. When you get to the end of the week, we get back to Sunday, we shock it again, it brings the chlorine level up and slowly goes down throughout the week. This is basically what you're doing every week when you shock your pool. This is the system that you're putting in place here. You shock it hard, it raises the chlorine, drops through the week, you shock it hard again the following week. Now let's take a look at what's going to happen here if we have some of these circumstances. So let's say you shock the pool hard on a Sunday, but then Monday you have a pool party. What I want to trigger in your head is that pool party has aggressively deleted your chlorine. So now, come Monday, your chlorine's dropped quite a bit. It levels out normally like it does on Tuesday, but then Tuesday night, we have a big heavy rains all Tuesday night, a downpour. Come Wednesday, There's not a lot of chlorine in the pool because the rain has used that up. Then on Thursday, you've got virtually no chlorine in your pool. And then by Friday, your pool turns green. And this is a big issue of what's happening when people's pools turn green. They're turning green because your chlorine content has lowered so much. So the question is, how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing is going to be excessive rain. If you have 2 days of hard downpours, what I want you to do is go out after that rain and put a small amount of powder chlorine, or what we call shock, to the pool after the heavy rains, or increase your superchlorinate on your salt system, whatever it is you're using sanitizer wise. What we're doing by doing this is we know that if it rains really hard, we're going to drop our chlorine level. So when that rain's over, we come out, we put a little bit of chlorine in the pool, we boost that chlorine back up. Now, I'm not talking about a normal weekly shock amount. I'm talking about just a small amount, just enough to get a little chlorine in the water and get yourself back on track. And it's a similar situation when we have lots of use. We have a big pool party on Wednesday. Let's go out on Thursday. Let's add a small amount of powder chlorine to the pool. That's going to raise the chlorine level back up and get you back on track, so that by the end of the week, your pool's not turning green on you. Now, the last one is, what do we do when we get some really intense sun, some really intense heat throughout the summer? This idea is a little more involved, so I want you to follow me on this. And keep this in mind, that the hotter the summer gets, the more chlorine you're going to lose. The sun dries the chlorine right out of the water, so you're kind of wasting chlorine when we get into the really hot part of the season. Now also, the water's going to warm up. You're going to get more bacteria in the pool. So the bacteria in the pool is going to be using your chlorine up quicker than normal. And it's summertime, kids are out of school, you're swimming a lot more. So when you're swimming a lot more, that's adding bacteria, that's adding contamination to the pool. So what you're going to have to do is, the hotter the summer gets, the more chlorine you're going to have to use on a week-to-week basis. Now, here's the idea. This is what I see most people doing, and I see this is where they're getting their issue. They stick to some type of chlorine maintenance, where every week of every month, they're using the same amount of chlorine. They're following this throughout the entire year. This would work. This would work in one situation. The fact that your water stays the same temperature all year long, same amount of sun, and the same amount of use. If you lived in an area where it was this consistent, then you'd be okay doing this. But the truth is, that's not what most of us are dealing with. What most of us are dealing with is temperature that's cold in the winter times and then blazing hot in the summertime. And because of this, we're using our pool a whole lot more in the heat of the summer, and we may not be using it at all come wintertime. Therefore, this same amount of chlorine every week of every month throughout the season, it's not going to work in this situation. So here's basically what we want to do. As we get into the season and the temperature starts to rise, we need to increase the amount of chlorine that we're using. We can't do the same amount every week, every month. Then, when we get into the real nasty hot part of the season, this is when we're going to be using the most chlorine on a weekly basis that we do throughout the entire year. And then the temperature is going to start falling off after the hot part of the summer. We're heading into fall, we're heading into winter. And this is where we start decreasing our chlorine use because we're not using the pool as much. It's not as hot anymore, and we just don't need as much chlorine. So here's a little more what your chlorine use, let's say, might look like. And keep in mind, all these numbers are not the amount of chlorine you need to use in your pool. These are all conceptual ideas. We're using just a tiny bit come January because it's freezing cold. We don't need a lot of chlorine. February, it might warm up a tiny bit. We put a tiny bit more in. the temperature starts rising through the season, we start using a little bit more. The hotter it gets, the more we use the pool. Now we're into May, we're really starting to swim. This is when we're going to be using more chlorine. Then we get into that nasty hot part of the season when we're using the pool all the time. It's nice and hot outside. This is when we're going to be bumping our chlorine up to the maximum that we'll probably be using it all year. Then the temperature is going to start falling again. We're not going to be using it as much. The kids are going back to school, whatever the case is. And this is where we're going to start dropping our chlorine off as the year goes. You know, I have a video on YouTube that is how to clear up a green pool. And it's interesting because it's right about that middle hot part of the season that video goes crazy. I'm getting thousands and thousands of views on it every day. And I've come to realize that what's happening is people aren't putting enough chlorine in the pool when it's midsummer, it's blazing hot, we're using it all the time. The amount of chlorine that they're using on a week-to-week basis just isn't enough. Therefore, their pool turns green, and now they pull up my video and they're watching the how to clear up a green video. So let me give you kind of a concept for your own understanding of the difference in summer hot water and winter cold water. So here's the idea. In my area where we do pools, I have a customer, let's say, that's using 2 pounds per week for their size pool during the summer. Come winter time, we're going to put 6 pounds of chlorine in their pool for the entire winter. So if we do the math here, 6 pounds of chlorine in the summer lasts 3 weeks. 6 pounds of chlorine in the winter lasts for 6 months. So that is a huge difference in how long 6 pounds of chlorine is going to last, depending on whether your water's warm or whether your water's cold. And I just wanted to share this with you so you really get the grasp of the difference in cooler water and the hot summer water. So here's the deal to recap this video. If you get an excessive amount of rain, add a small amount of chlorine powder, crank your salt system up, what have you, the day after the rain goes away. If you end up having a big pool party, put a little bit of chlorine in there after the pool party because your chlorine level's been depleted. Throw a little bit in there just to boost it back up so that you don't have any issues. And then when it gets hot in the summertime, be sure to raise your chlorine content that you're using in the summer and then bring it down and lessen your chlorine use come the winter months. I hope you guys understood this. I hope I explained it well. You're going to have a much better experience this season, I think, now that you understand these things.